I'm working off of one eye until they.
Why? Oh,
Go through the same thing?
yeah, you had cataracts,
I've got one eye done,
where'd you go? Where'd you have it done at?
Pacific Cataract and Laser Institute up in Salmon Creek.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Tell them you know me and you won't get a discount because they won't know me either, but that's where I went.
Anyway, I get the other one done this Tuesday.
Yeah, but they're really good there. I mean, they're. You have the more, did you have astigmatism by chance?
Yeah, I have the toricles, but
Oh, sorry, same lens, yeah, so if we won't be able to switch lenses, but yeah. But you're gonna be doing this for the next month until you can go back, find glasses for.
yeah.
Get a monocle.
There you go.
That's easy to do.
Well,
I had to get, I hadn't worn glasses for like 30 some odd years there. I was in contacts. And I wore the extended wear, which created a dry eye situation. So they had to take
Jasper, Alberta.
drops before the surgery to get the dry eye. So anyway, had to wear glasses for like 2 months before the
Crazy,
surgery.
isn't it?
When you get your the other eye done?
This Tuesday.
Oh, okay, not that far.
We are
So
blessed.
Dr. Berstrom popped one of the
We're lucky.
lenses out of
Yeah.
it. I got a pair of glasses at home.
Go with one eye on.
Lucy, did you sign the photo?
Not yet.
Yeah, I knew it was
Yeah,
a
Cheyenne-
fire going on
Cheyenne's
over
got a
there,
big-
yeah.
Big fire going too.
Oof.
There's a lot of fires going on.
Well, there's a fire over, there's some,
All right, call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Thank you all very much for being here. I think we are all in attendance. Let's see. Have Zoom up. Do we have Zoom running?
No one's on Zoom.
All right. I'm guessing public comments will be pretty minimal tonight. So it looks like you have a date, proposed date for the meeting with commissioners.
A date works for me.
what day was it?
August.
August
August
21st,
4:30.
the Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, 4:30? I feel like that was right, but that was okay. I looked at it. I just want to make sure.
Works
Again,
for me.
yeah, worked for me.
Okay.
Sound good?
So August 21st at 4:30.
Lucy, you good with it?
I have an appointment in Portland at 1:30. So I can probably make it back.
Okay.
And the location, it might be at the Hegwold Center. I'll talk more with Lisa about that.
Okay.
So, okay.
All right, we're on our time.
That's right where you want to be, isn't it?
Welcome to the Association of Washington Cities Elected Officials Essentials webinar. We are going to be getting started here now. So a few housekeeping slides. At the top half of your GoToWebinar's control panel, you'll find your audio settings. You have two choices. You can listen to your computer speakers or your telephone. You do not need a microphone during Welcome to the Association of Washington Cities Elected Officials. Submit them through the question panel located at the bottom of the attendee control panel. Your questions will be relayed to the speakers during the presentation.
Sorry, trying to make it. full
I didn't
screen.
see you back there. Did you have any comments for us?
No, I just snuck in.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. How are ya?
Good to see you.
Good to see you also.
By the way, happy birthday.
Officials
Yeah,
Essentials webinar. We are going to be getting started here now. So
Me too.
a few housekeeping slides. At the top half of your GoToWebinar's control panel, you'll find your audio settings. You have two choices. You can listen to your computer speakers or your telephone. You do not need a microphone during the event. If you do have questions, please submit them through the question panel located at the bottom of the attendee control panel. Your questions will be relayed to the speakers during the presentation at their appropriate time. So please, and today's presentation is being recorded. If you do have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can call the number on your screen, and a link to this webinar will be provided via your email after the webinar is completed.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Sugarman, AWC Director of Education and your moderator for today's webinar. Welcome to the first of 4 webinars designed and developed by MRSC and AWC to provide city elected officials with the knowledge needed to effectively operate within the law, plan for the future, secure and manage funds, and foster community and staff relationships. Today's webinar is about working together by understanding the roles and responsibilities of elected officials. We have 2 great presenters for you today, Jim Doherty from MRSC and Sheila Gull. Jim joined MRSC in July 1993. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from the Wheeling Jesuit University, a Master of Arts degree from St. John's College in Santa Fe, and his Juris Doctorate degree from Lewis and Clark Law School in Portland. In addition to clerking in 2 Oregon City attorney offices, Jim has been an assistant city attorney for 2 Washington cities. His legal career also includes stints as a public defender, private attorney, legislative counsel, and assistant attorney general. The latter 2 positions were with the government of American Samoa in the South Pacific. Also joining us today is Sheila Gull. Sheila is General Counsel for AWC and has worked on a wide variety of municipal finance, legislative, and legal issues since joining the AWC staff in 2000. She received her degree in political science at Stanford University and her law degree from Seattle University. It's my pleasure to have them both join you today for this webinar. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a quick poll. We would love to know who's on the webinar today. So please select one of the answers there: mayor, council member, city manager, administrator, or perhaps multiple attendees in one location or other. So go ahead and submit your answer now. Okay, we're going to close the poll. All right, it looks like 67% of you joining us today are council members. Thank you all very much for logging in today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jim to tell you a little bit about MRSC.
Thank you, Tonya. MRSC is located in Seattle, and it's a research and consulting organization that serves all of the cities and counties in the state and a growing number of special purpose districts. We have an extensive website, we participate in trainings, and we have an Ask MRSC program where we respond to questions from those jurisdictions that we serve. We also have a fair number of publications.
And I'll tell you a little bit about AWC. AWC is a private nonprofit with consistently all 281 cities and towns as voluntary members. We provide a variety of training opportunities throughout the year, like this webinar.
All right, so let's go through the agenda, what Sheila and I will be covering today. We're first going to talk about basic municipal governance in Washington, and that will include a discussion of the classifications and forms of government. Then we'll move on to the roles of the mayor and council member and conflicts that can develop between mayors and councils. Sheila will then talk about budget basics, open public meetings and public records, and then I'll have some comments on ethical issues. So let's start with basic municipal government in Washington and how this is set up in our state. So we're going to talk about classification and forms of government. A lot of the city organization was first set up through the state constitution, and it authorized the legislature to provide for incorporation, organization, and classification of the various cities. At that time, there were first-class cities, second-class cities, third-class cities, and towns. And the first-class cities were those with over 20,000 population at the time. And they were authorized to adopt charters and were granted what's called broad home rule authority. Here's a chart that's taken from the MRSC website, and it shows in one place the classifications on the left side, the different types of cities, and the form of government on the top, whether cities are mayor, council, or council manager. And you'll see that by a large margin, more cities are mayor council than council manager. Second-class cities and towns have limited authorities. They have only those powers expressly granted by statute and those that are necessarily implied from powers expressly granted. And this is referred to by lawyers as the Dillon Rule. It makes it difficult because sometimes when a second-class city or town asks MRSC, do we have the authority to take this action, it's not always clear. As a result of that lack of clarity and flexibility, in 1967, the state legislature adopted what's called the Optional Municipal Code. And cities organized under that code, which is Title 35A of the state statutes, can take action on any matter of local concern so long as that action is neither prohibited by the Washington State Constitution, nor in conflict with the general law of the state. And this form is called Broad Home Rule, and it's referred to as the Cooley Rule. Code cities have all the powers granted to any other class of city in any existing or future legislative enactment, unless the legislature specifically makes a statute inapplicable to code cities.
Stevenson's a code city.
As a result of this flexibility, all of the cities incorporating since 1970 have incorporated as code cities, and many other cities have transferred and become code cities.
All right, Jim, we're going to pause for a minute and take a quick poll. Quick poll number 2. How are most cities classified? First, second, code, or town? Please submit your answer now. Okay, we're going to close the poll. See the results? All right, Jim, tell us what the answer is.
Yeah, that's right. Most people got it right. There are far more code cities than any other classification. In fact, just over 2/3 of the cities in the state are classified as optional municipal code cities. So let's move on to the roles and responsibilities of those who run these cities. So we're going to talk about the mayor's role and the council member's role. First, let's talk about the mayor-council form of government. This is the most common. The mayor serves as the chief administrative officer of the city, and the council serves as the legislative body. And the council formulates and adopts the policies that the mayor carries out. The additional role of the mayor is that he normally attends and presides over council meetings, but the mayor doesn't have a vote except when there's a tie vote with the council members. Some mayor-council cities have a slight variation in that they have a city administrator, and that's a person with some professional experience or training that assists the mayor with the administrative tasks. The advantage of this form is that you bring into city government someone with some real management experience that can allow the mayor to focus on policy development and political leadership. In a mayor-council form of government, the mayor's role is pretty broad. He carries out the policies, he sees that laws are enforced, he's in charge of the day-to-day operation of the city, including the supervision of all of the employees and appointed officials. The mayor oversees hiring and firing, and with the exception of those city employees, they're covered by civil service laws. And if there is a city administrator, the mayor coordinates and oversees the action taken by the city administrator, because the city administrator's power flows from the mayor. In a mayor-council form of government, the council, as I've stated, adopts the policies, and they do that through the enactment of ordinances and resolutions. One of the strongest powers of the council is to adopt the budget. And Sheila's going to have a number of comments about the budget process, because allocating where the money goes is certainly one of the big policy decisions of the council. So let's talk about the council manager form of government. And for those of you in the audience that are in mayor-council form of government, it's good to understand the council manager form because some of your neighboring jurisdictions may be under that form, and it'll help you to understand discussions or articles you might read about that form. Under the council manager form, you still have an elected city council that's responsible for policy making. But a professional city manager is appointed by the council and is responsible for the administration. The city manager, similar to a mayor in the mayor-council form, provides policy advice, directs the daily operations, handles personnel matters, including the appointment and removal of employees. In a council manager city, there's still a mayor, but he is a council member who is chosen by the council to serve as mayor for 2 years generally. The mayor chairs council meetings, but he votes as a council member, and he serves as the ceremonial head of the city. Sometimes I think some residents in a council manager city often misunderstand that the mayor has very limited authorities in a council manager city. So what's different for a council in a council manager city? First of all, a lot's the same in terms of passing legislation, but the council has the additional authority to hire and fire the chief executive of the city, who is the city manager. And even though the council has a lot of authority to terminate the city manager, it's important for a city council to provide freedom to the city manager to make the tough administrative decisions that's part of running a modern city these days.
Okay, we're going to pause for another quick poll. Number 3, who has the authority to decide which items are on the agenda for a council meeting? Mayor, council member, clerk, or all of the above? Please submit your answer now. Okay, we're going to close the poll, and here are the results.
This is a little bit of a confusing question. Ultimately, it's the council that decides what's going to be on their agenda. Keep in mind, it is the council's meeting. However, it's certainly common in many cities for the mayor and the clerk to assist with that process administratively and prepare the preliminary agenda. But you'll often hear at council meetings at the beginning, the person presiding over the meeting will ask if there are any additions or deletions to be made to the agenda, because that is the authority of the council members themselves.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to do another poll. Which is not the role of the council member in a mayor, council, and council manager form of government? Setting the budget, providing direction to city employees, setting policy on the long-term direction of the city, or all of the above? Please submit your answer now. Okay, we're going to close the poll, and here's your results.
All right, most people got that right. Providing direction to city employees is not the job of the council. That's sometimes a source of conflict, often in smaller jurisdictions where it seems everybody knows everybody and stops by city or town hall. But it's important for the council to not get tied up in the administration of the city. That's the mayor's job. So now we're going to move on to some comments about conflicts. This involves conflicts in policy and administration. And that frequently comes out in hiring and firing or personnel decisions, in administering contracts, and the budget process. Remember, for all those involved in municipal government, it's a team process and nothing is accomplished alone. Progress happens when everybody takes the time to listen to each other. And this is not just the discussion between the council members, but it's also the mayor trying to explain to the council why he's administering the city in the way he is or she is. Keep in mind that every perspective or view is partial, but has some truth. It's certainly common for people to enter into a discussion, and as one person is speaking, they're just preparing how they're going to rebut what the other person is saying. It's important to take the time to really hear what the other person is saying, because there's usually the other person is expressing a view or a concern that probably is reflected by other people in the community. And if you gain an understanding and appreciation of the complexity of your own community, then you'll be better able to, through the policy process, pass policies that that reflect the diversity in your community. For budget basics, I'm going to pass this over to Sheila now.
Thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, the budget is an important duty of the mayor and council. We're going to briefly focus on roles and responsibilities because knowing your roles will help it go more smoothly. So the budget process generally, setting policy through the budget process is a continuous year-long process. It involves setting goals and establishing priorities. Public participation is a critical piece to the budget process, and it's also required by law because of the many policies and decisions. Once a budget's adopted, the mayor or city manager is responsible for carrying out the budget, and the council members are responsible for monitoring program progress through periodic reports from staff and from the community. If programs are not effectively implementing policy decisions, you can also make revisions or amendments to the budget. So here's an example of a timeline for the budget process. What we wanted you to note here is really just a continuous cycle of input, adopting, implementing, and then planning for the following year. We mentioned a little bit about the mayor's role in the budget. There are really kind of two big pieces. There's the introduction of the preliminary budget. The state statutes provide details concerning how the mayor's required to prepare a preliminary budget and also a budget message with the main themes of the budget for the year. And then once it's adopted, the mayor is in charge of budget implementation. The mayor has the authority to make transfers within individual funds as provided in the law. Some other steps in preparing the budget include estimating revenues and expenses, projecting expenses and revenues out maybe 5 or 6 years, and preparation of a clear and detailed preliminary budget. The council's budget role has both an early and late piece. Very early in the process, the council probably will have adopted some strategic goals, and that helps sort of guide the priorities in the budget. In addition, many cities have adopted fiscal policies, and those help guide decisions on things like debt or one-time revenue. And then once the budget has gone through the process, the council, of course, adopts the budget. So a little bit more on adopting the budget. The mayor starts the process by presenting the budget to the council and the public for review and adoption. Some cities use a budget committee for part of that review, and hearings are held with department heads and with the public to review those expenditure requests. Once hearings are completed, a budget ordinance is enacted by the council. The ordinance authorizes specific expenditures with specific resources. Then back to the mayor's role for budget implementation. The mayor's job is to implement the budget adopted by the council and provides the council with periodic reports to show a comparison of revenues to expenditures and how that compares with the budget projections and appropriations. The law also requires the city to present a quarterly report of unexpended balances for each appropriation to the council.
All right, thank you, Sheila. We're going to take another quick poll. Once a budget is adopted, who is responsible for carrying out the budget? Mayor, city manager, or council member? Please submit your answer now. All right, we're going to close the poll. And Sheila, what's the correct answer?
Well, You are all right. That was a bit of a trick question. Depending on your form of government, the administrator of the city, be it the mayor or city manager, is responsible for carrying out the budget. Council members are responsible just for monitoring the program process. So now we'll turn over to open government and its importance for city officials. So we'll start with the Open Public Meetings Act requirements. The public has a right to watch the policy adoption process, and the elected officials really need to stop and think. Any process that involves council members working toward a consensus on an issue outside of an open meeting is probably illegal or suspect, and you need to seek advice. Another issue that quite an issue among cities are executive sessions. You need to remember that executive sessions are for limited purposes and not merely to avoid discussing in open session an issue that's just merely uncomfortable. MRSC has some great resources on this topic, including a publication that can be downloaded from the MRSC's website. The Attorney General's Office has an open government resource manual, and AWC and MRSC have partnered on e-learning courses. And in addition, on MRSC's website, there's a step-by-step process for the difficult issue of executive session. Now turning to the Public Records Act, elected officials need to remember that public records have a very broad definition. For example, it includes social media, text messages, emails, videos, photos, as well as your standard documents. Presume that anything you write regarding city affairs is open to review. And you need to think about disclosure before you create records. Another source of litigation recently, you need to make sure that you separate your personal and city work to the extent possible. Finally, withholding or deleting any record, even if it's controversial, is potentially far worse than just providing it. So again, MRSC has some resources on its webpage, particularly some checklists on basic procedures, as well as practice tips on electronic records and retention. We would encourage you to take a look at those.
All right, we're going to take another quick poll. Which is not covered under the Open Public Meetings Act? Gathering for a council retreat, attending AWC's annual conference as a group, members discussing items through social media or email chains. Please submit your answer now. Okay, we're going to close the poll. Sheila, what's the correct answer?
So 75% of you were correct. The answer is B. There's an exception for educational events as long as you're not taking action by discussing city business.
All right, thank you. I'm going to do one more. Quick poll. Which of the following are public records? Emails, text messages related to city business, photos, phone messages, or all of the above? Submit your answer now. We're going to close the poll. Sheila, what's the answer?
Well, all of you got it right. As a reminder, public records have a very broad definition. Now we'll turn it back to Jim for some discussions of ethics.
Thank you, Sheila. Nobody wants to be considered or accused of being unethical in their city business. So you need to be careful, and these ethics issues come up in several different ways. First of all, there are contractual conflicts of interest. This primarily involves council members when they're voting on an issue before the council. If it involves a contract that you are involved in at all, you need to look at the issue very carefully. We recommend that you review the issue with your legal counsel. Some contracts are okay. So for instance, if a council member works at a bank and the council is deciding whether to do business with that bank, that's probably going to be okay to vote on it, although because it's considered a remote interest. But if a council member is voting on anything that's going to put money in their pocket in some way, then that should be a concern. Another area that involves conflicts is the appearance of fairness doctrine that applies to quasi-judicial proceedings. Sometimes the council sits in what's called quasi-judicial role when it's deciding the rights of an individual person, typically in a land use matter. In those situations, it's important that the council members deciding the issue have the appearance of being fair. So this is why sometimes it's not really good for a council member to be very outspoken on a matter that they know is going to come before the council in a quasi-judicial proceeding. And as a general standard in all of your government dealings, whenever something comes up and you or another council member is going to be voting on it, and you get the feeling that this really doesn't pass the sniff test, and that's a broad term that we use around here just to refer to an uncomfortableness that something isn't right here, that you have a particular interest in the matter that's going to be voted on and you don't know if it's right. That's the time to sit down and talk it over with somebody else. We certainly think that you should consult with your legal counsel because these are the issues that can sometimes get into the press and look bad later on if you make the wrong choice and vote on something that you really shouldn't have. So we encourage you to learn about the issues that come before you and understand your roles and responsibilities well. The city administration, generally before a council meeting, distributes a fairly good packet of background information. Read it carefully. In addition, AWC and MRSC are doing a fairly good job of pushing information out to you on issues that you should stay up to date on. Follow our newsletters, our blog posts, and our websites. If you're interested in understanding what's going on at the national level, Governing Magazine has a number of newsletters that you can subscribe to. And certainly, don't hesitate to get involved in trainings and webinars such as this to stay up to date and understand your roles better. And AWC has an excellent annual conference where there are presentations on a large number of topics. And it's a good opportunity to network with people from around the state and see how other cities are approaching problems. One major resource that AWC and MRSC has partnered on is the Mayor Council Handbook. And I really recommend that every once in a while you take a look at that publication. It can be downloaded from the MRSC website, and it really distills a lot of the basic information that we've touched on here in the webinar today. And also the publication has some good appendices that provides a lot of detail that may help you do your job.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you both, Jim and Sheila, and thank you to all the attendees that have taken the time to submit questions during this webinar, because we do have time now to take a few of those. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila and Jim, and they're going to answer the questions that you've provided.
Okay. I'll ask the first question and Jim will answer. Who has the power to direct the city attorney?
Well, you know, sometimes that's a difficult question because the city attorney works for the whole entity. The city attorney represents the council, the mayor, and the city itself. So it's proper for all city officials should have some access to the attorney, although as a practical matter, in some cities, they request that questions to the attorney get funneled through the city administration. And sometimes that's just to coordinate that activity. So here's another question. Can a mayor hire or fire an employee without council confirmation or notice? Sheila, what's your take on that?
The answer to that is yes. The mayor or city manager has control over personnel issues, and this would be an example of that.
You know, in some code cities, there is a procedure for the council to confirm the appointment of certain employees, but clearly discipline or the firing of an employee is always the job of the mayor or the city manager. So here's another question that was submitted. Does the mayor have the power to refuse to carry out a directive from the council? Sheila?
That's another complicated one. No, the mayor's job is to carry out the policy directives of the council. While they have the freedom to carry out the policies of the council is the one to set the direction.
Yeah, you know, at times we've had some cities that get into real conflicts between the mayor and the council. It happened in the last few years. There was a lot of press about the city of Pacific, and then more recently in the city of Black Diamond. And when there gets to be that sort of a real breakdown in communication and cooperation between the mayor and council, we certainly recommend that the city take the time to step back and try to work to resolve the conflict before it gets too bad. Sometimes the city's insurer can step in and provide some direction. Sometimes the city attorney can assist, or you might bring in a facilitator. But it's important that that you really take a deep breath when there's a lot of conflict, because things aren't productive when you're just fighting over issues.
All right, here's another question. How do we get free legal advice from MRSC?
Well, MRSC's advice is always free. You don't have to pay when you ask us a question. So the cities and the counties provide funding to MRSC, and we try to respond to questions in a timely way when you ask them. Keep in mind, though, that MRSC is not your legal counsel. Lots of times we don't have the full background on a question. If you pose a question and provide us with the facts, we'll base our answer on the facts that you've provided. So it's important to be as complete as you think you need to be when posing a question, and always check with your city attorney because there may be additional facts that you didn't provide to us.
Okay, here's another question. If a council member makes a motion to proceed on an item, but adds language to caution the questions of a specific member, is that censoring? Do you want me to repeat that?
Yeah, please do.
If a council member makes a motion to proceed on an item, but adds language to caution the questions of a specific member, is that censoring?
That question's a little unclear, but certainly when there's a motion before the council, all the council members have the authority to join in and participate. If there are issues about a conflict, you can certainly raise that with the attorney, but all of the council members are elected to participate in the discussion and vote on issues, except when there are clear reasons that a council member shouldn't vote. Most cities follow the Robert's Rules of Order for their basic parliamentary procedure, and some cities have additional rules of procedure. So always consult those when you have issues about what's proper procedure in a council meeting.
Okay, one more question. Is it all right for council members to ask how city departments work?
Well, it's certainly fine to ask and get information from the mayor or the city manager about how things are running in any individual department. But council members need to be aware that there's sort of a fine line between getting information and intruding into the administration of the affairs of the city. And certainly most mayors and city managers in cities that are functioning well, they'll freely let the council know all the information that they need in order to understand how things are running in the city. But it really is important for council members to use some discretion in how they intrude into the administration of the city.
Great, thank you both. I think that's all the time we have for questions. You also have their contact information in front of you there. If you think of something after the webinar, feel free to reach out. And at this time, we'd like to thank you for participating and joining us today. An evaluation and a recorded link will be sent to you within the week. We encourage you to watch the recorded webinar with your council and refer back to it as much as you need to through December of 2018. This topic will be covered again at our annual conference by Steve DiGiulio from Foster Pepper. This year's annual conference is June 26th through the 29th in Yakima. We'd love to see you there. We also hope you join us live for our next webinar on May 22nd for Finance 101 for elected officials. You'll receive the link to watch within 1 week prior to the webinar since you've already registered for the subscription, so we appreciate that. If you watched today as a group, please fill out the form that was emailed to you to receive 1 CML credit towards roles and responsibilities and legal requirements. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
That was a good training.
I watched a few of their other ones this week.
Yeah, it's on the AWC website. There was another one, but it was an hour long. So what? So certified municipal leader, and so I'll take the information and fill it out, but there's information on the AWC website on the CML program. And it's
You can actually go on there as a council member and log in and take these different webinars yourself at home, and you will actually get credit for those. Pretty slick.
There was one I tried to sign up for, but it said I couldn't because I wasn't the city. I was.
oh,
Oops.
if you do ever have a problem with that, just let me know.
Okay.
If it's something that you need, and I can work through it with them.
You can say, I'm Liana.
Right.
Are we required to have so many credits?
No, so the only requirements for council members are the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act training. And that was within that huge letter that I had sent. But I believe we will be attending, we'll be doing a group training on both of those coming up. So.
It doesn't hurt to go over those once a year.
No, yeah, and I think there's a requirement to go over them.
Within 90 days.
Yeah, so within 90 days, and then it's like every 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched that one earlier this year.
I guess that was within the initial package that you sent me, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Any other thoughts on what we just saw?
I did have one quick question. If we do have legal questions that we need to ask, do you prefer that we go through you?
What, through Liana?
Or through Liana? Because I had the city attorney live across the street. And I don't want to be bothering him inappropriately.
Whacking up our bill.
I can, this is billable
Yeah,
in the driveway.
Yeah, really.
Mhm.
Okay, so next up, want to have a discussion about how we can streamline our council meetings. We are right up against time on a regular basis, and
I think 3 hours should be enough time to get through business. So I would love to have some thoughts on how we can keep the meetings on time and efficient.
What constraints are we under in getting information ahead of time?
As far as,
As far as items on the agenda to discuss, business that we're gonna be voting on.
Like how
If
far
we're-
ahead of time?
Yeah, what constraints do we have and how far ahead of time we can get that information?
Staff resources.
and then we always encourage, so it's, because it's a fast moving process, sometimes the research isn't fully, I can't say fully baked, but complete until, a couple of days, the week before the meeting. But if you do need some more information that is provided in the written form, I always say that staff is more than happy to pick up the phone or spend some time with you. Love to go over all of the information.
I guess I've been asking too many questions during an open session is probably one way to slow a meeting down.
Questions and understanding can sometimes flush out or help others understand. Maybe they have their own question that has been answered. But we also encourage that once you understand what the topic is going to be, to try to get to glean some of that information before the meeting. So that we can keep the meeting moving along.
It also seems like sometimes, maybe it's not always going in circles, but sometimes it seems like we linger on the topic for a long time. And maybe we should at least have a motion at some point.
So Robert's rules actually state that a motion needs to be stated before discussion can take place. We kind of loosely follow those. But if you're going by the book.
So we should technically have a motion on the floor before we discuss
We have a
anything.
motion and then we say any further discussion, and that's when we get to discuss.
Okay.
That would help in keeping discussions succinct. But the other thing that we're also trying to avoid is racing to emotion. So there's a fine line in there too. So.
Yeah, because sometimes we modify it because of the discussion.
Well, and you can amend motions.
Right.
Well, one thing that could be helpful is, I know a lot of, and this is kind of a time suck, a lot of times I'll be reluctant, I don't always want to be the one talking, and so I'll wait, I'll have something to say, but I want to be courteous, I'm waiting for somebody else to talk, to hear what they have to say first. And then there'll be silence for a long time. And then I think, well, I better speak up because nobody else is speaking up. So I thought, well, how do you resolve that? And it might be if if we thought, okay, like whatever order, like, maybe it could be switched up based on the issue. So it isn't all to start the same way, like, Lucy, do you have anything to say on that? Okay, then it's Pat's turn. So you kind of go on a circular thing until the discussion's over, as opposed to, there's that time kind of wasted while you're waiting. Well, somebody else's turn, are they going to say anything? And so if they have a designated turn, I mean, it kind of, whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. But
Okay, and then another thing to consider too is that it is thoughts and looking for clarification, continuing to express thoughts can be perceived as trying to gain someone's vote in a particular direction. So keeping your thoughts and your questions succinct and then knowing when the questions have been answered. So
can you define the participation? If a motion's been put on the floor, ask for clarity, anybody need clarification? And then move on to,
so we have it's not a real switch, like, it's been suggested that maybe a parliamentarian would help keep our meetings moving. I don't know that we need to go that direction yet, but cramming everything we can, and we used to be able to get through meetings in 3 hours and not have to spill over into what's supposed to be a workshop session, not picking up stragglers and crumbs on the, picking up stragglers that we couldn't get attended to during the regular meeting. So getting someone in here that can say, we talked about that already. Is there anything else you need before that you're prepared to make a vote? But continuing to wax on so that somebody might actually change their mind. That's where things start to stretch out. So we need to find a way to keep our comments and our thoughts succinct and get that clarification that we're needing. I also understand that the format of when we can all meet, speak together, having an open dialogue can be very helpful. Well, I thought this one, I kind of thought that too. We need to find a way to tighten up those sessions if we can. Because I hate this notion that we're racing to find ourselves, our meeting is getting away. And so we have to make this decision about whether to put off a discussion or not have enough time to have the right conversation.
I think the conversations are important. I know, you know, I mean, around
That's
some
the
of these,
tough
around some of
spot.
these topics, I think they're absolutely important for all of us. Seeing, and like you were talking about, seeing somebody else's view, you know, not, maybe you walked in and you only ever thought about it from this side and then go, oh, that's an interesting way to see that. You know, whatever the case is, it's important, but I understand we don't want meetings to go till 10 o'clock every month either. So
what's the adage? It's a wise man that hears a differing opinion and might change his own. So I understand that getting a perspective that you didn't have initially, and if that would change the way you think and would be able to get behind a different opinion, then great.
So for me, like I value hearing the different views on it. We just have to try and figure out a way to keep it moving. Because sometimes Lucy is right, sometimes we do go in a circle. As a group, all of us kind of bounce off this and we go over here and go over there, you know, and so I feel like there is some of that absolutely happens. And so finding a way to go, this is the views, this is why I think this on this, or hey, have you thought of, you know, I hadn't thought about that before, or whatever the topics, and then wrap them up.
I think some people also tend to be more naturally concise, and some people tend to naturally restate what their point several times in different ways.
I am verbose in my nature. And so I know that I don't always work on the most succinct way to have a conversation. So I'm willing to work on that myself, absolutely, in the amount of time that
Well, we have
gonna do that. So
someone here in town that is a qualified parliamentarian who's willing to volunteer their time to help us streamline our meetings if that's something that we're interested in.
That sounds cool.
At least maybe even get a feel for how we can do it on our own.
I mean, I never know.
One thing would be, sometimes the staff weighs in. Will intermix their opinion and questions at different times, and sometimes that is to solicit a vote. Like they see a vote's going a certain way and they'll say, well, what do you want to hear? What would change your mind? There'll be comments like that. And so really, I think there's probably we're all responsible for the meetings going on, but it's a council meeting, not a staff meeting. So I think once the staff have given their report and answered their questions, they're not part of the council. Maybe they, unless the council has a question that will help answer the question or help someone learn more. Maybe once the council is given their report, that then they stay out of the discussion and not just chime in as they might. And I'm not faulting the staff for that, because we have operated in a collegial sort of friendly way, but it does But sometimes you can tell they just don't like the way the vote's going and they, hey, what would it take? What do you need to hear? You get that dialogue going on, and I don't know if that's.
I don't know that I could agree that they're trying to sway a vote, but I have seen staff weigh in when there's a log jam that we just can't get past.
Yeah.
Ben,
Don't
and
forget.
Ben, I'm not calling out anybody particular, but Ben is good to notice that. Because we will get to a certain point, and he will provide the dynamite, so to speak, to keep us moving forward and keep us focused on where we're supposed to be. And I appreciate that from him. Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say, you're going around the table and you're getting people's opinions, maybe in order on an issue. And giving everybody a chance to speak their voice and then go, ask again for any clarifications. So you've done clarifications first, voicing opinion, clarifications on anything anybody said. And then maybe the last question would be, does anybody need any more information to make their decision?
And I kind of like the idea of the motion before we start discussion come, because right now we discuss before motions most of the time, like we'll go, it's not always. But the motion, and then we go any further discussion because we've already discussed it all. And I kind of like the idea of we need to, before we spend a half hour on something, make a motion and know where you are and then go, okay, let's discuss the motion and get everybody ready for a vote. I think that'll keep things, I think that in my mind, that would keep things moving a bit more. In a way, as long as there's a motion to be made on that subject, I think that would keep things moving.
I am intrigued by the idea of immediately going with the motion. Because someone that comes to the meeting knowing that they don't approve that motion could immediately just make the counter motion. I move that we don't do this.
So
Well, you have
motions
to-
are generally not in the negative.
So, but you'd have to vote
You'd have to vote
negatively on
negatively,
the
yeah.
first. on
And
the
just
first
because you
motion.
make the motion, you don't have to vote for it, by the way.
Right.
But I'm intrigued by the idea of
Yeah.
sticking with the rule, because if someone. You don't get discussion until you get the second.
Right.
So is this gonna be? We
Just
just have
something
no-
just die
we
on
haven't
the, it just
Well, yeah,
it dies on the
there's no
vine on
second
that,
to the motion,
there's no
it
second
dies
motion,
on
it'll die on the vine and then wait till.
I am
You
keen
wanna
to
bring it
try.
up?
And
I
if you
think
don't-
it just, if it's in the rules, if it's in our, I think
Think
it's.
about it, if you don't have a motion to put on the floor, you don't really probably have
Nothing to
much
talk about, but you gotta get things moving, so.
Right. So for me, I like that idea, and I'm just one member, so I'm not in any way. Steamrolling that, but I like that
I
idea.
agree with.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we need to make sure that we do is we're up to speed on what the details are for possible motions that are on the agenda. Council meeting night is not the time that you should be having to go through an issue and trying to figure out where you want to be on a vote.
And that is the way the public comment is supposed to go as well. It's supposed to be
Yes.
the public commenting, not doing their research in the middle of a public hearing as well. So.
Correct.
So I think if we tried both those approaches and what Chuck was saying about if it were a little more orderly. We tried both those.
I don't have an issue with that either. I
Yeah, we
I
tried both.
absolutely don't. When it comes to, okay, we have a motion, discussion, start here, start there, whatever.
Well, there was, I forget what the meeting was, but we're all just sitting here and I feel like not even joking really. It's like, I feel like I'm a host at a dinner party. It's like, ooh, nobody's talking.
We sat for, I remember what that was either. We sat for a while. We're
Yeah,
like,
I just.
and then finally once we started going, then we
Yeah.
went, but I think that's a good idea, that you brought up, maybe start at different spots and
Yeah,
move around
yeah.
and everybody gets a chance. And then, clarification, I have a question about what you said about that, I have a question about why you think that, or whatever that is. I think that's not a bad idea. So both of those work for me, just to try it out and see if we can keep things moving.
All right, and I will try to enhance my moderator skills,
Okay.
say, are we done?
I think one thing too is the ability to, if it comes to you. And you want to listen to what the other four are saying, there's nothing wrong with you saying. I'm gonna pass.
Come back.
I'll catch you on the second
Yeah.
round.
Could try.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the staff report, like the staff, let's say the staff's giving a mini report on it, then the motion, so the staff would. Then the motion, and if there's a second, then the discussion,
Discussion. Yeah.
and.
Mhm.
And then the clarification with the staff would be at what?
Yeah, and that's like, well, if I have a question, if it comes to me, like, that's just, can only speak, right? So we did something, I made a motion, started this thing, the staff gave their report on whatever we're doing, right? I made a motion. And then I'm like, but I have a question about this piece. Then for clarification purposes, I can ask, I ask a staff member, what does this really, what's this piece mean? What's this graph? What's that line actually? Because like we've had, some of those things, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean what I thought it meant. And I looked at it the first time. So clarification on that would be in the time when it comes to my turn, I can request that information and then go, okay, well, that makes sense. This is why I think that's great. Or I'm totally anti that. Hey, you're
Or
on.
you might find yourself wanting to amend.
Which we can run to that too, when we've done it before, absolutely. So, yeah. Is that,
Well, you definitely have to have consensus to amend a motion, otherwise you just vote no.
right, and you can make another. whatever.
So
So-
Jurassic Parliament is a good resource that's included in that council member intro letter.
Mhm.
And they have some good easy ways to understand Robert's Rules of Order, and she does a really good job of explaining motions and amending motions.
Mhm.
She is
and
really
all of
good.
that. Yeah.
She's really good.
Okay, all great ideas.
Also just staying on topic.
I was just looking
What
at the
is it?
calendar, apparently we have about 2 weeks to try these new ideas, so.
Yeah,
Because our
because the
meeting
next
is
meeting's
outside.
early,
Yeah.
yeah, it's out of our normal time. But I mean, I really think that if we try it out, and if it isn't the way that it feels, we can look at something else, but I think that. It would be nice if we can maybe keep things moving a little bit faster and go along.
Okay, perfect. Strategic plan. Strategic plan is important to have in place so that we're all looking in the same direction. Staff is planning appropriately, looking for grants appropriately. So they need to be more than firm. They need to be pretty firmy. Need to have something in place so that we have marching orders, and it should be for more than a couple of weeks, longer than a fruit fly. So we agreed on a strategic plan and then had a very robust discussion and sussed out a lot of the issues that we're facing with a housing crisis. So in light of this, let me say, very robust conversation, even if it just kind of underscored the lack of tools that we have working for us, would anybody like to, well, let's talk about what we feel about the current strategic plan as far as what the priorities are.
I think housing kind of connects to a lot of other issues.
What are the priorities starting? I can't see.
Sorry,
Those are-
so the kind of the bigger buckets that we have for focus areas are financial responsibility.
Right.
Infrastructure, the look and feel of the community, governance and internal processes.
feel like, I mean,
And, and when we looked at, or you can't make it bigger,
sorry,
but overall, housing, was listed as number 6,
both
both in
years.
2022 and in 2024.
Well, and I think one of the things that Lucy's absolutely right in that housing, it bleeds over into other parts of what we do as a city.
Like is connected to the school budget issues because the population of kids under 10 has reduced by over a third in a decade. So there's less money because there's less children enrolling in school. And then, so young families can't afford to live here. And then you end up with a bunch of vacation homes and that affects the utility usage. So
Right, it's tied to a lot of everything, so I don't, are we looking to try and move housing up? Or what's the concept?
Coming to meetings with a passion.
Mhm.
We really need to look at this, but you already said that these things are important.
Absolutely,
So chasing the tail
sure.
is very inefficient. So along the lines of how some of these match up, I contend that planning and zoning and strategic land use also
Absolutely, I was good, I wasn't
tools in the
done with
toolbox
that, yeah.
that work towards housing.
Mhm.
But it all comes down to if you're gonna pick a direction on planning and zoning and strategic land use. If that's where we're gonna start, then that's where we could have to figure out what direction we're going. So if it is to work on a housing tool set, then we need to keep that in mind as we have these discussions, and then also be prepared to assist or carry the narrative so that we don't have these weird, just this vitriolic, you can't give the developer money, we need that money. So we have to have total support for those types of, certain tools are going to be prepared to defend them, and hopefully the rest of the community will see why we're working in this direction.
And what are you giving up? Because you can't do it all.
Question.
Query.
I'm assuming that you've had many meetings or even special, well,
We'd retreat.
beta retreat, kind of thing of putting this plan together, right? Okay, so do we have, again, like we talked, a motion on the floor to accept the strategic plan as it's been devised?
We did.
We already did.
Okay.
At
We
the
did.
June
It's-
20th.
Right.
Not that long ago, and yet had a very, well, you were here. A very lengthy
So
discussion about housing and how feels like unprepared, but we don't have the resources. It doesn't feel like, no, we don't have the resources that we need to make a
okay,
difference.
so we're talking about two different issues, though. I'm talking about housing is a big issue, separate issue. And I'm assuming that, is there somebody that's got to do an ad hoc committee on housing that's on city council?
That's why we're talking about, is the strategic plan the one that we just approved?
Right, would we like to move,
Or would you like to
move housing?
reaffirm?
So we're reprioritizing.
And the question is, do we want to reprioritize and move housing? And if we do, what needs to go
And keep
down
in mind that
to keep that, to make that possible?
So do we have a motion on the floor to do that?
No,
we're just discussing,
This is just-
but keep in mind, changing the plan every 2 months is unsustainable.
Yeah.
right,
But I see what Chuck's point was,
My point is that we put, that if we have some issue with something that we want to put a motion on the floor to reprioritize, maybe moves, housing to a different level or whatever, then we have some discussion about it.
Okay.
but can we do, this is a special meeting, we can't.
Well,
do-
no, it's listed as a meeting.
Oh, okay,
And so with the special meeting, you can only do the things that are on the agenda. So this is just reviewing and discussing. So there's no
we can't do
action
an action tonight.
on this one.
That's
It
why I
will
was saying
come
it's-
forward at the next meeting with more action items related to anything that comes out of the discussion.
The way I look at the plan it's the guiding document
Mhm.
on where we want the city to go. And within that document, several different items coexist.
Mhm.
And they all affect one another, like Lucy has said. I don't know if moving housing up does anything.
Doesn't.
Because housing is affected by planning and zoning. It's you know, strategic land use and development. You know, multimodal transportation affects housing. And how do those people get from point A to point B? I mean, those are all. They're all part of the overall focus and direction on where we want to go. 1 month, we may have, for example, I just got done talking with Dean Molinado about his development down there and how frustrated he is because he can't move forward with it because of this appeal that Mary has up there. And I get that, you know, he's paying, you know, probably thousands of dollars on interest just because, and he can't do anything. And I get that. And I appreciate his thoughts on it. And I don't fault Mary either. But the process, how do we help him, or is there a way to help him move that process forward while he's waiting for this appeal decision to come down? And I'd actually made a comment about it, I think at the last meeting to Ben about could he get his cabin plans approved and get them ready to go so that when the appeal process goes through, if it goes in his favor, then he can move forward with the plans rather than waiting for the appeal process and then having to go through the plan process and getting that all done. So how do we make those adjustments within our overall strategic plan to help out these developers? Those are the things that I look at is how do they interrelate? And do we really need to change the level of them? I mean, you know, financial help. I mean, that's.
Was that internal processes that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I
our
personally,
taxes and everything.
not having had any experience in going through and putting this together, you know, I went through the entire plan. And when I read this, to be honest with you, I didn't even notice that it was ranked supposedly order of importance because I figured they're all important issues, and their particular order to me didn't really seem relevant. I mean, it didn't seem, I would say, how can I put it? Yeah, it was kind of irrelevant what the order was because they're all important issues, and they just assume that they're all going to be taken care of. But so I think I will offer the opinion that internal processes does kind of lead into a lot of the other issues, and planning and zoning and housing and all of those things are affected by whatever internal processes we have in handling those things. So I was fine with the entire plan. I would have been, if I had been asked to vote on it today, I would. So I know you guys put a lot of work into it. I don't think you need to go back and reinvent it.
Because if you look at number 5, for example, I mean, if you look at housing, well, number 6, well, we know that housing may involve number 10, partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess I would agree with what Chuck's saying. We're not, if I know parks and outdoor spaces are down at 11, but the city does own parks. So, I mean, so we're not, by having that at 11, we're not going to say, well, we as a city can ignore our parks because it's down at 11. So I don't know, and to me, a lot of little things, I mean, you have the day-to-day running of the city to have an efficient operation, to have a clean city, to have a vibrant downtown. A lot of those things, no matter how little or small you get, will fall. Like some things, I've heard people say, well, or one thought I've had, and I've also heard people say it as well, if you fix the little things that are wrong that are easy to fix, do that. Do what's right in front of you before you work on the big things. Well, any of those, you say, well, you also got to think ahead 20 years. Well, that's true. But any of the little things that somebody may say, hey, we can spruce up the city, or we can make this better, or we can take on a code violator or whatever. Any of those things will fit under these broad categories. So these are kind of broad categories. So it's the day-to-day operation of the city, and then where do we want to be in 5 and 10 years? But in the short-term goals, like what do we want to get done in the next year, would be smaller things. So sometimes this, in my mind, we're talking about such broad subjects, like what's affordable housing, how are we going to fix it? It's so broad that you can't get your teeth around it and get specific. And okay, well, what can we do today for affordable housing? A, B, C, and D. So it's how you frame the question. But there may be something really little we can do, like lower a fee for something over here, or do this, or a subsidy.
And I had asked, in my conversation with Dean, I'd asked him, are you interested in doing something like, for example, like Troutdale or Gresham have done with the multi-level, retails on the bottom, apartments on the top, to help out with affordable housing and how getting maybe a partnership going, with Mid-Columbia and he says, yeah, I'm interested in having those discussions. So again, it gets clear down to the bottom down there where you need partnerships in order to, work on something else. And I agree, they're all important. And I think we're going to find ourselves bouncing back and forth. I think it's where you want us to focus first. Is that what you're looking for, Mayor?
Yeah, see, okay, so there's some decisions, for example, we did conduct a study, land use, where we could, making decisions on where we're gonna do zoning. That's not gonna have a right now change. It's planning for 5, 15, pushing the city in the right direction. So
like annexing and those types of things.
Right.
Okay.
Affordable housing or attainable housing density is going to become important. You need to have smaller homes that are affordable for small families, hospitality workers. So if that is truly our mission, then everything that we're going to do from here on out has to be focused towards that. And keeping in mind that when we sit at this table, that those are the types, that's what guides our decisions. So if it's important to encourage density or encourage growth so that we can find our way into fixing the housing problem, then who's going to put the sewer in? If you say that the city's going to do it, then then the budget needs to reflect that. We will be putting sewer in the ground so that we can start building out so that it's easier to provide these partnerships. So keeping the goal in mind. So pick what's the priority. If it's going to be improving infrastructure to enhance density, then those are the things that staff is going to work on so that we can get those building blocks in place.
And so really the plan drives
staff time.
Liana and her staff to go after grants and those types of things as well.
So when you look at your 8-hour day and say, okay, what percentage is going to be, what's the percentage on that task? Maybe 8 hours.
Maybe look at this in a month and go, this month, I'm gonna be working on what piece of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
What are the, how does it get prioritized? Because not that we don't do these, because we do some of all of these things. The city does some of all of these things. It's prioritizing the time and efforts of the staff that we're looking for. And I think that we're right in that housing, you could probably pick like 6 or 7 of those that'll tie into housing. But if we want affordable, attainable housing to be the focus of the reason all these tie in is because of that, then maybe I think that's what Steph's looking for. So if that's really what we're looking for, then does that go up to number 4? And what was down? So go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I like the way they're organized right now, to be honest with you. I always believe in not putting the cart before the horse. And before you plan on doing anything, you have to have all your organizational pieces in place first. You have to have your finances in place, you have to have your processes in place. You can't talk about doing building until you've got proper zoning, where you're gonna put the housing.
A great example of that is making the decree that a certain percentage of your vehicle fleet that you churn out of your factories is going to be electrical by 2035.
Yeah.
With no discussion on how the infrastructure needs to be improved, how we're going to help.
Where are you gonna get?
How are we gonna get there? I don't know, but you gotta get there. Aren't you gonna help? I don't know, but you gotta get there.
You have to have good information, but you have to have your organizational pieces in place before you actually plan anything. But like I said, I don't know the process you went through in putting this together. But I liked it.
The bare bones was what, like we've all seen. All sit down and just start pulling out little tidbits and then boiling it down to getting it down into the core components.
Yeah, I think an important thing is just considering all the other stuff, considering how it may affect housing.
Absolutely. Or how the other things, how housing affects the other things. I mean, that it drives that housing drives a lot of those things too.
So, because there's topics here that haven't been on the radar before. The city population is stagnant, but the amount of new homes going up is not. So if housing is something that's going to be kind of guiding us, we need to keep an eye on what kind of dials and levers can we come up with? Tamp that down. Development is good, but if we have a direction that we have in mind, then somebody sitting over there is going to have to figure out how we can guide growth. We like growth, we like a specific type of growth. If we even want to control the speed of the growth, but we need to fund the growth too.
And part of that is the processes that we have in place in order to help that growth move forward, i.e. how the building permit process happens, how a zoning change request is handled, and make sure that we're doing it in the most expedient manner, because time is money to developers. And the more time we take as a city to push something through the process, the more it costs them on the back end because of interest. And so we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to move that process through as quickly as possible to help them then move forward with what they want to accomplish as well. And so we both win at that point.
Well, sometimes those partnerships involve other government entities.
Yes.
Who might not be as not motivated is a horrible word.
Proactive.
Well, thinking in the same direction.
Right.
Or maybe that if it's county land now, then maybe they have plans for that county land. But that could be potential annexation for the city. And if we don't have those conversations, then the county says this is what's going to happen with that property. And then it doesn't matter if we're going to annex and zone it. If it's not an option anymore, then so I am involved at least for a couple of years on some of their important things. Yeah. Is this helping at all? Yeah.
So the gist is it's not gonna change and we'll move forward with the tasks in creating the budget for 2025 as adopted at the June 20th meeting.
That seems to be.
That's the gist.
Yes.
So bottom line, so when you said at the last meeting in November, we'll discuss further. There's no additional action items that staff will be preparing that will take significant time on this matter. Nor will anything be included in the budget unless the strategic plan changes, because the reason why we have this plan is to guide the budget and where staff is spending our time. And so within this, I pulled up the memo that kind of outlined, you know, things that we're talking about for potential tasks. And so those are what's listed in the document. And so these are tasks and items that will be included in the budget for the next couple of years to implement this plan and to implement the priorities. So if you're talking about looking at planning changes, if you're talking about looking at the annexation policy in depth, if you're talking about looking at all of these other things, those are all on hold because staff doesn't have time, because this is what we're working on, is the bottom line.
You guys worked out a copy of this?
It's in the June 20th agenda. Or topic packet.
We have something on our website where we can plan that, right? Or-
Can I ask,
Plan.
when you say if, can I ask a question? If we're talking about it, okay, is anybody talking about? Like, if you're talking about this or talking about that, like you said, are there people, do you feel that the staff is being pushed in different directions from that memo now?
No, I understand. I just wanted to clarify.
No, I wasn't asking you, I was just asking Leanna. I mean, I'm just asking you, and I'm trying to understand. Do you feel that there's pressure on the staff to do something different than that memo?
Yes.
now? Okay, that's where I'm genuinely confused about. And so that is because, so that's what I'm confused about.
Or is it that we are doing that?
So requesting, so maybe it's setting expectations. At the last meeting, there were 3 items that that staff was to come back to council with after the November election for further discussion by council. And
Okay.
so that's sort of where I'm saying it's not on this list. And so if you want us to do any more work on any of those items, other than what I provided last time, which is just a brief links, and here's the data.
Right.
That's all we're providing. We're not doing any deep dive. We're not doing anything else outside of what's on this list unless it changes.
And so was one of those items affordable housing? And was that one of the items that that the staff felt they were getting direction on?
There were 3 bullet points on the topic of affordable housing.
Yeah, what I was curious about is, see, that's one thing I was confused why that was on the agenda. I understand it's a concern of all of us, but it seemed like a huge thing to be on the agenda. So it's on the agenda and we're asked to give input on it, and it's kind of such a big topic that it's kind of impossible to, in a meeting, to figure out answers to it. I'm not trying to say it's not important, but yet I for one wasn't trying to steer the staff on anything on that topic, because I wouldn't do that. It's a hard topic. It's like trying to solve global warming if you think it exists, you know. So I didn't.
It was requested to be put on the agenda.
Okay, but I mean, it's important. I know.
I wanted to have an initial discussion about it.
Yeah, and I'm not. We all know it's important. Like, but that's where I just felt, well, we're compelled to give direction, and it's kind of like, all I know is it's a huge issue that we need help from everybody everywhere to solve. So I for one wasn't trying to get staff, well, you should do this, because I don't know the answer.
Well, and the question was, do you want to get further information to make that determination?
Yeah.
And that's where we got direction with
Yeah.
3 items.
Yeah.
But again, not doing deep dives on them.
Again, are we still talking about strategic plan, or are we talking about affordable housing?
Well,
That's
they're
the-
talking about
That's
it.
what started it.
That's
So
what
the
start-
concept is that
So you need to know what's gonna drive your budget.
they need to drive what happens
Yeah.
between now in November,
Yeah,
or now in the next 2 years.
Okay.
Well, for example, within, so zoning and planning was one thing that was talked about and looked at. And a number of years ago, we started implementing some of the recommendations out of the buildable lands inventory and housing needs assessment, and came up against some opposition and lack of political will to move that forward. And so what ended up happening was it stalled. And so it will take a lot of staff time and a lot of involvement in order to move that forward, to make any sort of dent on whether or not that's something to continue with. And so if that is what if that's what council wants to be as an outcome, then it needs to be a priority, because there's not the bandwidth, there's not the resources currently within the plan because of these other priorities.
and
I'll just tag one thing on something that Pat was talking about, and as far as trying to tackle an issue that's a global issue. I sat and did a little research on affordable housing for our, specific terms of our community. And I didn't want to get into any discussion on it tonight, because that's a lot of discussion. But I think anything that we decide to do in terms of something like affordable housing need to be geared specifically to the needs of Stevenson, and not so much on a global, as a global issue. And our objectives should be quantifiable, measurable. They should be, specific and not in terms of, yeah, we need more housing. Okay, well, what kind of housing? Where are we going to put it? Have we identified available,
Well, that's kind of what she's,
space in town and that kind of thing? So it's like, but they need to be specific, measurable goals. And I mean, I was looking at, how many units do we have in existing units do we have in town right now that are serving like Schedule 8 housing or whatever, and trying to keep it in terms of those people that fall below 50% of the median income of our community, and coming up in the neighborhood of about 20%, or roughly about 400 units that we need in town, currently serving about 330. So maybe we need to develop another 60 units in town. Well, where are those 60 units going to be? What are they going to be? Apartments? Are they going to be, what kind of housing? I mean, so everything in specific terms. What is it we're looking for? Where are we going to put it? What's it going to cost? What resources do we need to do in partnerships, and whatever do we need to do those things, rather than just talking about it globally?
So to bring it closer to town, like you said, we have
We're not going to solve the world's problem, I guess what I'm saying.
decided that we would, if we're gonna be serious about affordable housing, the very first thing you do is do land study, usable land study. Did that. There was some action items. There was some pushback from the community, and it's all gonna come down to political will. This table has to be ready to say, this is important to us, this is why. So heard, but this is something that's important to us, and this is the direction that we're going to go. Density is important to us, so this is the direction that we're gonna go. So when a developer comes in and has plans to build, I don't know how many, 25 units, something like that, and says, I would like forgiveness on the SDCs, because that's a tool that we have in our toolbox. We have to sit at this table and tell whoever comes and says that that's not a good idea. That's the direction that we're going, and we have to be ready to say, that's what we're gonna do. Thank you for your comments, but unless there's something better that you have in mind, this is something that's important to us, and we feel that it's important for the community at whole. This is the direction that we're gonna go.
Well, I read about 50 of the 100 pages of that study today. So that was gonna be my next question is how many of those things have we actually looked at or implemented? Some of the suggestions, I think one of the suggestions had to do with rezoning and a couple of them, yeah. So a lot of those things already been done.
The process has been started, but like Liana said, there was.
A lot of that stalled out right
Pushback.
before, actually, I think before this council started. Was when some of that, like some of those things actually came up that were trying to get, there was a developer who was looking to do some Section 8 housing, and there was community pushback, and then, and so it was voted down. And so there is.
That was for Section 8 housing, yeah.
Well, it needs to be mixed development and it needs to be done
Which,
in harmony with other types of development, so people know that we're not creating a mecca for people to come to Stevenson.
Yeah.
The developer was gonna do mixed units in that.
Yeah.
But then he heard the pushback and said, yeah, maybe another time. And council said, oh, that was close. So.
Right, what we're saying is basically some of those measures and those steps, they were died because council didn't support the measures and steps when there was pushback. So that's where staff is looking for direction on if we're gonna make that what we want, then we have to take some things off of that list that she was showing, and B, have to be able to when there is pushback, go, well, this, we know from the community and from ourselves that this is something that is important, and we're willing to stand up to even some pushback on that. So that's the direction that they're looking for. Or we go with what we have as far as we already set for priorities. It's already listed out what they're going to be doing going forward, the deliverables.
Voted on.
And we already voted on it twice. So
when is this up for review again? What's the standard? Remind me of how often.
strategic plan.
Yeah.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah.
Or 5 is better.
Okay, so this was, when was this specific one? Remind me, I'm sure.
This one was created in 2022.
2022. So the next one that's broad like this, that gives direction, will be created when?
2026.
2026.
So generally, it's like when you have the turnover of council.
Right, the big turnover council.
Yeah.
2 years.
So, yeah, part of the concern I have is we always have to get community feedback on stuff. In other words, I just don't want to be in a position where we're going to be heavy-handed, and that's maybe a strong word. I'm not trying to say that people are suggesting that, but with their citizens have a right to weigh in and have a say in their neighborhoods. And so I think that's why I think we're always going to have to get buy-in from citizens on stuff because we represent them. And we can't just say, well, 3 years ago, this was voted on, too bad you weren't around. So I think, and I know it's hard, but I made this point last time, that getting public buy-in on a project is hard. But without that, I don't know that it's ever, in other words, that's what you need. That's what any big development or land use plan or a master plan review or anything, it always involves, you want public, it's their neighborhoods. You're messing with their neighborhoods, or you're making their neighborhoods, in their eyes, better, the same, or worse.
You also have to consider that the people you hear from are not all of the public.
Right, yeah, so.
Right, the 20 people that came in are not the
Yeah.
whole public.
And you're not hearing from people that can't move.
Right, you're not hearing people can't move, you're not hearing people that are,
People who had to leave because they couldn't
So-
afford to stay.
I think it's
So
important.
it's a big, it's a big.
Chuck was talking about specific goals, like one very straightforward one is, like you said, is about 20%. For,
Yeah, but generally 20% of the housing, I was looking at some of the state.
and the population is about 30%. So we have 30% of the population competing for 20% of the housing.
Yeah.
And they can't, the other housing is not available to them. So
I think part of it is gonna have to do with scale and trying to keep it reasonable and letting people know that we're not trying to infringe upon other people's. Yeah.
Pardon me? Oh, wait,
So,
I'm missing.
Okay.
I think, what's that? I just told the mayor that we're getting off into
Yeah,
a
we are.
housing
We're talking about
discussion and we
strategic
weren't
plan.
gonna be doing.
Okay, I just heard two things at once and I was trying to listen to both.
I guess I want to make sure that we've got the tools in place.
Yeah.
So that when a developer comes in, they can say, okay, I want to do this development here. What zone is it in? What are the requirements? Where is the sewer extension? All of those things. So all of those things are in place for them so that they can move forward with presenting the project. And then we go through the public hearings and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, that is, you look at these things, and if these things are in place and we are addressing these things, then you can have development come
Okay,
in and do things like.
well, that begs the question then, do we have the proper zoning in place right now to where if somebody wants to make a proposal and come in with affordable housing, that we have a place for them to build it. Now, under our current rules, is that possible in Stevenson? They could come in and then we could take the tools in the box, subsidies or whatever, and offer them to them. Or do we need to do zoning changes? In other words, is there places in Stevenson now to where that would be permissible to build that?
Well, there's property.
Okay, so then.
Well, then the rules
well,
were,
then what-
again, it's a different discussion, because the rules are in place. What we're asking is, what do we want the city staff to do
Well,
going forward? Do we want them to just work on
Probably-
changing the things that are changing the rules and
but
the.
maybe we don't,
legislation.
and the reason that answer to that question is important is, I don't know if the rules need to be changed. If we already have
That's what I'm
rules
saying.
in
The answer
place.
is yes, it's already available, because we could have done, it could have already happened. Had the council voted a different way, there would be mixed housing in a section right now.
Okay, so for that to come back, for somebody to come back and bring a proposal to the council again on that, could they do that under this strategic plan? In other words, nothing's to prevent that from happening
Correct.
now,
Correct.
right? So we don't have to change priorities or anything. We could leave this, I'm just asking this as a question, I'm not making a statement. If we left this the same, we could be presented with an affordable housing option that was mixed use now, right? Yes, I mean,
Unless they decided that they needed to request a zone variance.
okay, and they could do that.
Depending on the location of where they want to do their particular.
So do
Yes,
But
we,
there's, those
It's
processes are already in place to do that.
and it
yes.
would not violate the strategic plan.
Correct.
So that's why I'm getting confused on what needs to be different that isn't, I mean,
So what the discussion is about is, we have things in place and affordable housing isn't happening.
okay.
What needs to change to make it happen?
Well-
And that's what the analysis is for staff. What tools, what do we need to do to make it happen?
Well, and one of the not ironies, but the more staff is spent going in different directions, the longer it takes to get a building permit. So if, I'm just trying to say that we can hurt ourselves, because if somebody's building a small house, the more staff is able to focus on processing those permits or helping somebody like Mr. Amamoto come in under the rules, the more staff can work with them and help them, the faster we'll have what we want, right? So that's where I'm getting. So maybe.
I'll just say one more time, I think the organizational pieces that we have in place that you got here, the priorities are probably correct and appropriate.
So
Because a lot of the questions you're talking about are organizational pieces that need to be put in place.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're there and existing before we move on to the next steps.
And actually, there's stood up a brand new process to ease building permits.
Right, the online, yeah, we're already moving forward with ways to make that better, so.
Liana. Help me.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things that we asked staff to do?
Shoot. My notes, pre-approved building plans, zoning and partnerships to acquire property.
Okay, zoning is already done.
It would be
Unless-
look at
unless-
change, no, these are all looking at changes to
Changes.
zoning. What changes can we make?
It's a pre-approved things, zone, what's the second one?
Zoning
Zone.
and partnerships to acquire property.
Working with the county.
And with the county or whoever, like the nonprofits or, because that was brought up.
Mhm.
But the idea is, do we wanna, those three things, they basically. We were like, hey, by November, we're looking to have these three things done, but then the staff is like, look, the priorities we have set up here. Don't give us the time to do to deep dive into those things.
But can I?
Does that make? Go ahead.
They are on the list, got the zoning partnerships.
Yeah, so that's my point, is they are
Some of
already
that's on
in
there.
the strategic plan.
No. So this is the priorities by strategies compared. The strategic plan are only these 5 areas with the tasks associated with them.
Yes.
It's not this entire list. It is only these focus areas that we will be working on.
So my question, my point is. If a developer comes and he needs a zoning change.
There's a
then-
process.
Then that's right, there is a process and it's addressed at that point. Why do we have to go out, look at the property that's within the city limits and say, well, we want to change this over here. So if a developer decides to come, then he's got that available. If a developer decides to come and wants to put his development there, he can request a variance if he needs to have that done.
Time and money.
Absolutely.
No, that's why.
That's
Yeah,
the problem.
but-
That's the problem, is it takes more money, it takes more time, and
Right,
you're
the
you're
problem
not
is
On the
guaranteed.
developer
But
side.
you're also not guaranteed that it will go through.
Right, the variance may not go, so the developer, if our plans, if the current zoning doesn't fit what he's trying to do. That she, they, whatever, they may just decide, I'll find somewhere that already has it that fits, I don't wanna spend the time and the money.
And then we're
To do
also
that.
assuming that the landowner that we're talking about
Hmm.
is willing to sell it at a price that is able to have a
Okay.
developer come in.
So, but
Okay.
the question is, these three
Leon,
things,
I'm done.
those items that
Right,
you,
right.
I don't
Yeah.
think those three items.
those 5
need to be
items,
done.
those 5 items that you were saying are in the strategic plan
Yes.
currently.
Mhm.
Have you guys, are you
Yes.
got your eyeballs on?
yep,
Are we good?
Mhm.
we're good, in my opinion.
What do you
Okay.
think?
Mhm.
Lucy? I didn't hear.
Well, I'm looking at the one, protect community appearance, character and identity. I'm just thinking about the little towns in Europe and Japan. That the young people all left and they just die. So.
It also happened, so there, ABC News did a story on a town in, Montana. They're closing the mill because they can't get workers. They're also having a hard time getting workers for other shops in town. And the reason why they don't have, additional development or additional apartments come in, partly was because of COVID, and so people moved there work remotely. And so the housing prices shot up. The other reason is there's no sewer. And so they can't get the density because they can't get all of the septics in. It's also, next to a river, so there might be other constraints too. Right, and so they don't have the infrastructure there to build the housing that's needed to get the workers, to keep the jobs, to keep everyone in town. And so that's something that is really close to home. I mean, Carson.
Mhm.
So that's something where, the community voted against the sewer system again because of that cost. Not seeing the potential impact of that decision down the road. And so that's what we're trying to communicate is if things don't change, we will continue down the road of the large homes on large lots which is a conscious decision at this point,
Mhm.
versus there are ways to have increased density and keep that small town feel. And it's not gonna happen overnight,
But it's gotta start.
but it has to start somewhere. I mean, if the entire city went R3, you're not gonna have a bunch of apartment complexes from here to the city limits. It's just, what decisions do you want to look at making now to change the projection and change the trajectory of how things are going, where it's unaffordable?
So.
Mhm.
So is it correct, that would fall under the policy development on that topic, right?
The downtown design standards and a tree preservation planting standards, that's what's under this one.
Mhm.
So those are the action items. Because this look and feel was talking about and I'll go back to the memo that we put on there. The look and feel was about these tasks on creating the more or less the downtown core and the overall look and feel of the city.
The tasks were based upon that,
Right.
yes,
Not zoning.
right.
Mhm.
Right.
But it does sound like under this, on the current strategic plan, there is land available to put in affordable housing.
If a
mixed
developer
use,
wanted.
If a developer wanted it. That's what I'm hearing, that we not saturated that totally yet at this point, right?
It's not affordable for them to do it because they can't get as many units on the lots to make it worth their while.
Okay. But then if,
How many units do they need to build?
It depends on, I don't know, but that's why it's not getting built here.
okay, and are you saying that these are areas that don't have sewer to them? I mean, is there?
Just in general, like we don't have enough flat spots.
Okay,
just in
okay,
general.
so it's topography more than any.
It's all of it.
Yeah,
It's all of it.
Together.
Yeah.
Scenic Act,
It's all of it.
Okay,
topography.
I
that's
mean,
right.
again, they couldn't, the
Economy.
Mississippi Housing Authority had a really hard time getting a development done in Carson, and it's because they couldn't get the
Yeah.
density on the lot. And they just couldn't get it to pencil because they couldn't get enough units on the lot because it was septic.
To make it
And
pencil
so,
out.
to make it pencil out, and so they were able to finally
Yeah.
get it, but, again, you know, if you can get more on a lot, it makes it easier for developers to move on it.
And developers are gonna go do what makes them money.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes, affordable attainable housing is not what developers are gonna do to make them money unless there are ways
So
that the
maybe,
city can assist with that or partner, but again, this is a
Maybe-
big discussion.
maybe incentives aren't the right approach. It needs to think more.
But
about
again,
requirements.
to do that analysis, though. If you want
Well-
staff to put time and effort to it,
It needs to move
then it needs to be,
one of the four
Right.
things or five things
right,
that are up there, and one of those things needs to not be up
Mhm.
there.
well, what's weird is you could staff could spend a ton of time on it and we
And
still
do
can't
nothing.
move the ball at all anyway. You know, so it's, I mean, in other words,
I. It is a big issue and it's a huge
Mhm.
thing and it's something that's ever gonna stop coming up. But I don't know that right now. I don't know, it's hard for me to say we need to reorder what we
yeah, and,
put together right
Right.
now. I have a hard time seeing us taking something off of there and putting that on.
and as
that.
things come off, it'll be reevaluated.
Sure, as we finish things or things are completed that are on that list, absolutely.
and I think
So-
the reason that some people said. I mean, it's called wait, all I was saying when I said, hey, let's see what happens if we don't have good partners now, let's see what happens after the election, because maybe we can get some help someday.
Sure.
You know, is all because.
Mhm. Right.
So that was a way of not saying, hey, do this now or
Yeah, I
change
think-
this.
I think whatever happens, it's not gonna be just Stevenson was gonna involve other agencies, the county and everything.
Yeah, but that's saying that maybe some help someday isn't saying to the staff, well, change this and do this.
Yeah, I think we're consensus overall.
So, going on round 4, still good?
Still good.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
So no 3 items,
Thank you all.
young lady.
Well, we'll just provide a very quick.
There you go.
Well, an overview and maybe, and we really don't know who's gonna get, I mean, there's a lot of people on the ballot for a lot of things.